With the departure of big-name wide receivers in the 2024 offseason, the Chargers had work to do in the draft and with the undrafted free agent pool. The team addressed the need quickly with the addition of Georgia wide receiver Ladd McConkey in the second round, before taking the time to flesh out some other needs on the roster, then pairing up USC's Brenden Rice and Michigan's Cornelius Johnson in the seventh round. Then, the Chargers did some work directly after the draft in bringing in wide receivers Jalen Gill, Leon Johnson III, and Jalen Johnson from the undrafted free agent pool, along with tight ends Luke Benson and Zach Hines. But what does each addition bring to the Chargers roster? What do they bring to the table? We're going to discuss it right now. I am your host, Jason, and this is Blueprints, a Chargers Unleashed podcast. So I think we learned our lesson on the last video with taking way too much freaking time in discussing players each individually. I remember I went in with the goal to discuss each player for about 1 minute, and it just turned into 8 minutes for a variety of UDFAs. And then I'm talking like every undrafted free agent turned into just talking about him for several minutes. I think Thomas Harper ended up being 9 minutes. I think Zamari Walton ended up being around 8 minutes. And I remember just looking at each individual clip of me talking about these players that I had told myself they were going to be closer to 1 minute. You know, if I went a little over, that's not a huge deal, but it wasn't even close to 1 minute. It was way over. So today we're going to try a little bit better on discussing what is important about each guy. And, you know, if we want to talk overall picture for longer than a minute, you know, that's great. But I definitely want to try to hammer out what these guys bring to the table for about a minute individually, because it just turns into an absolute slog. And I want you guys to be able to listen and stay interested throughout the episode. I want to be able to also be more, I don't want to say useful with my words, I don't know if that's the right thing, but more efficient with my words, to really be able to drive home the picture of what each guy brings to the table without taking 7 minutes to just repeat the same thing over and over, maybe, or I'm not describing things well, and so I feel like I need to add a little bit here and there. To be fair, I really liked that DB room. I really like those additions. So I have a couple of things pulled up here that we're going to be looking at throughout this. One of them being Pro Football Focus, and then one of them being my own charted numbers, which I have right here. And then I'm going to have Pro Football Focus on my monitor over here. So we're going to discuss each one. We're going to start at the top here. We're going to start with Ladd McConkey out of Georgia. Drafted by the Chargers in the second round. Listen, there's not too much to say because, you know, as a second round player, I feel like most of us know what Ladd McConkey is bringing to the table for the Los Angeles Chargers. You're getting a great route runner. You're getting somebody with great body control, you know, somebody who doesn't have the longest arms, but is still able to reel in some tough grabs because of that body control, because of his technical refinement that he has coming out of college. And that's really something that you look forward to seeing from Ladd McConkey. I know we've already seen a little bit of it with Justin Herbert through various videos or sources over on social medias and such like that. Yeah, that's not a surprise that Ladd McConkey is meshing well with Justin Herbert, because Ladd McConkey does everything well that Justin Herbert loves. You know, you talk about the out routes, you talk about the intermediate routes over the middle, you talk about seams, such like that. This is just a really good fit, and I foresee a ton of those hole shots from Justin Herbert that Ladd McConkey will reel in. These two are going to pair really well together. They're going to bring a lot to the table in terms of understanding defenses and understanding where to put the ball and where to catch the football as well. I think you talk about these two safety looks are starting to give quarterbacks a lot of problems as teams start to want to slow down these deep passing games. And I think it's really important to have a receiver like this on your roster that can find that hole behind the linebackers and underneath the safeties, or between the safeties down deep, or between the flat corner and the deep half, whatever the case may be. Ladd McConkey showed a lot in college, and we haven't even gotten to his ability to run with the football, his yards after the catch ability, 6.3 yards after the catch per reception, a 12.2 ADOT, which is that intermediate I'm talking about. 9 missed tackles for us. He had 3.26 yards per route run. And, when you talk about these numbers and what Ladd McConkey showed through college, you're really starting to understand why he was such a fit for this most likely heavy play action scheme that Greg Roman is going to run. Ladd McConkey, what he brings to the table is going to be those intermediate routes and the ability to break those tackles or avoid those tackles entirely as he picks up speed and builds up steam down the field. And I'm really excited to see that technical refinement mixed with that, like, just pure athletic ability that he's going to bring to the Chargers with Justin Herbert. So really fun pairing there. I'm really excited for Ladd McConkey, and I'm really excited to see how they move him around the formation and pair him up with Joshua Palmer and Quentin Johnston as well. Next up, we're going to discuss Brenden Rice out of USC, and this is a great story, son of legendary NFL player Jerry Rice, and played with Caleb Williams in college, and is just coming into the NFL as, I want to say, his red zone ability is probably what stood out to him, to most teams, as he went through the draft process, as he played through last season. But even with that aside, you're talking about 2.75 yards per route run, a 5.2 yards after the catch per reception, though granted a lot of that was in the open field. There were a couple of busted coverages, whatever the case, but that's taking nothing away from Rice. Once he builds a head of steam getting downfield, he can run with the best of them, and he showed that against some solid safeties in college, where he would just beat him over the top on generally a deep post. And I think there's something to be had there, and a little bit that you can work with in terms of that contested catch ability, that body control. He showed the flashes, and I know a lot of people are unimpressed with the contested catch from him. But kind of similar to his run blocking grade over on PFF, the run blocking grade isn't that good, and his contested catch percentage stats aren't that good, but you see the flashes very often, and you definitely see the effort on full display at all times with Brenden Rice. And I really think that's the point that you need to drive home when you're watching Rice, is that effort that he constantly puts in on every play. Really, it's just max effort at all times. Will he fall short sometimes? Of course, every player does, but there's something to be said about a player that plays with as much effort as Brenden Rice does. I read somewhere someone compare him to how Isaiah Pacheco runs with the football is how Brenden Rice runs his routes. And you definitely get that feeling sometimes with Brenden Rice. There's definitely something there in terms of just how angry he runs sometimes. He's got a good frame, 6'2", 208. 40 time was a 4.50, but again, once he gets ahead of steam, he has that long speed that you want to see. Really excited to see what role he can carve out here. I think you're probably looking at somebody who can fill in on the boundaries a little bit more. I don't see too much slot work in his future, but I definitely see the boundary being a big deal for him in terms of his size and what that long speed does, and his body control, the flashes that he's shown out there on the sidelines. So excited to see what Brenden Rice brings to the table with Justin Herbert. I think that, anytime you have a quarterback like Justin Herbert, those flashes turn into consistencies, and you want to see that become a consistency out of Brenden Rice, because if it does, I really feel like that's what he's missing. I feel like he needs a little bit of work, on that route running ability. And I don't want to dive too much into that, because I don't want to, I don't want to knock his route running. Obviously, he's had some really good coaches through his career teach him how to run really good routes. And you definitely see the technical refinement there at times, but sometimes you need to see a little bit more freedom in his routes. And what I mean by that, probably a bad word to use there, but what I mean by that is a little more looseness in terms of like how he uses his eyes, how he manipulates the DB with his hips, gets into the blind spots, such like that. I think if he can start adding little bits of that into his route trees, kind of not take away from the technical refinement, but add a little bit more manipulation to his route trees, things that would fool the DB, things that would get the eyes of the DB over there when he's going inside, whatever the case may be. I think Brenden Rice has the potential and shows the flashes of that. You just didn't see it enough. And that's why I think there were a few people that were quite a bit lower on him. But again, with Justin Herbert at quarterback and with the coaching staff in place, it's not too big of a concern for me right now. I think Brenden Rice has the potential and shows the flashes, and that's why you draft players, is because of those potentials and flashes. So excited to see what Brenden Rice brings to the table. So now we're going to get into Cornelius Johnson out of Michigan. And this one's interesting to me because the yards per route run is low. It's at 1.77. The yards after the catch per reception is low at 2.6. The numbers, not great. Even the drop percentage is hovering near that spot where you don't want it at 9.6%. That's close to the 10% that you don't want to get close to. But he doesn't have bad hands. And for the average depth of target at 11.5, it's not like he's not a deep threat. That's definitely what he is. He's a great player in terms of getting deep and the body control and contorting his body, just another way to say body control, but tracking the football, getting under it and making some really good catches. I don't know where it kind of went wrong in that Michigan offense, but I didn't like what I saw out of his route tree in terms of there were a lot of plays where he just run a smoke hitch or a 5-yard hitch or a 10-yard stop, 10-yard curl. And, I just don't think that fits him very well. And they were really expecting him to, make those short area catches and then use his quickness to get up. I don't think that's his game. And when they let him play his game on the deep or in the intermediate to deep part of the field, it generally worked out pretty well for him. Now, Greg Roman with that play action scheme, I have a little bit more hope for this because you talk about those deep crossers or you talk about those deep posts and the things that he did really well in college and showed those flashes. That to me is where it's what his game should rely on. And I think with Greg Roman, with Justin Herbert and the type of offense I think they're going to try and run in Los Angeles, this just fits a little bit more than what I saw on tape over at Michigan. This fits a little bit more. And it's really going to depend on what we see here in training camp and in the preseason on how I feel about him heading into the regular season. But if they're using him the right way as, kind of that Quentin Johnston backup where, you're moving him around, running him on some play action crossers, play action shots, I think this can really work for Cornelius Johnson. And on top of this, you're getting a high effort player. You're getting a 63 run block grade. And like I already said, the effort on the deep portion of the field in terms of catching the football, getting under it, the tracking ability, the body control and just boxing out DBs. I don't know that there were too many receivers in college that were tougher in that portion of the field. And so you think of all of Justin Herbert's best throws to Mike Williams over the years, and then you watch some Cornelius Johnson tape and you kind of sit back and think, okay, like I see this project. I see what the picture is. And so that's why I'm excited to see if Cornelius Johnson can maybe take that step, or maybe they're utilizing him in a different way than Michigan did. And that's why I have some optimism for Cornelius Johnson in comparison to a lot of other a lot of other people, because I just think there is something there on those crossing route opportunities that he can take advantage of. And we've been talking about potential, and we've been talking about flashes, and I think that Jalen Johnson might have had one of the smaller opportunities to really showcase that potential in those flashes, and that was against Michigan, against his current head coach, Jim Harbaugh. Jalen Johnson out of ECU, measuring in, just for some familiarity, just because he's lesser known, UDFA, measuring in just over 6 foot at about 200 pounds, and ran a 4.53, I believe, at his pro day, with a 9 foot 9 inches broad jump. And the not too much size here, not too much speed, but a 4.5 is a good time for a smaller school guy. Definitely a slot build, I think, at this next level. Though Joshua Palmer, I think, is 6'1". I'd have to double check on that, and actually plays the boundary pretty well. It just really depends on the style of receiver you have. Jalen Johnson against Michigan had a really solid game with a couple of missed opportunities, whether it be by the offense as a whole or by the quarterback, or just a miss. And even with that, against Michigan, he did show a solid couple of plays that you look at and think, okay, so he can hang with these corners over at Michigan. He can win his battles. And if you look at a smaller school prospect like that and see that he can win his battles against the bigger schools, well, then you might have something there, because you got to account for the talent around. You got to account for your guys and how good they are. And Jalen Johnson, well, I'm not going to say he blew up the scoreboard or anything like that. He did play a really solid game, and even the catches that weren't there, he did showcase some pretty, I would say, above what you would expect route running. I liked his out routes quite a bit. I think he showed a lot of potential in terms of manipulating the DB, like I was talking about earlier, in terms of running those routes, flashing eyes inside, or turning hips inside, or if you're running a corner route, selling with your shoulders on a post and then cutting it out. Knowing how to round his routes out, and when to sit. It's kind of like the opposite of Brenden Rice. He showed a little more creativity in his routes, but not as much technical refinement. Brenden Rice, a lot more inclined to drop hips, turn inside, make the very technically refined catch, versus Jalen Johnson, a little bit more creativity there, in terms of he's willing to round out his route as long as he sells a fake inside that can turn the DB before he makes his cut out, which is what you saw a couple of times at Michigan on those out routes, or on those intermediates. And I was really happy with that when watching Jalen Johnson. Doesn't, again, smaller school guy, doesn't have the best numbers. The drop percentage is a little high, at 14.3%. That's not great. But you saw the flashes against a big school, and you think, you can work with that, and you can provide him NFL level coaching and maybe see what you can get out of him. So Jalen Johnson, excited to see what he does over the course of training camp in this preseason, and excited to see what role he can carve out for himself. I know there's going to be a practice squad spot or two open for some of these guys, and they're going to have to battle for it. So we'll see what he does. I feel like we're already a little bit familiar with Jalen Gill out of Fresno State, because he's been getting so much work as a kick returner in camp, and that's something definitely to pay attention to. 76.5 receiving grade at Fresno State. That's something that stood out to me, because it was a lot higher than other UDFAs around the league that you would see. And the 2.2 yards per route run, again, higher than other guys around the league. In fact, out of all the UDFA acquisitions, that's the highest for the Chargers, is at 2.2 yards per route run. And another thing to pay attention to, especially because of the kick returning, 7.1 yards after the catch per reception for Jalen Gill. So he offers what you need in the kick return game. He offers the yards after the catch, He offers the sure hands, the missed tackles forced at 11, only a 3.9% drop. So, and he has a 71.3 run block grade, which I don't know how much that'll come into play with the new kick return rules. But it wouldn't hurt. And he's already getting that second team kick return role in camp, those reps. So there's this is an interesting one because I don't think the spot is open from Darius Davis. In fact, I'd be pretty shocked if that was even a competition at this point. But you can't ignore Jalen Gill and what skill set he brings to the Chargers, because it's very unique when compared to the rest of the class. There's a lot more yards after the catch to be had with him than anybody else in this class, the Chargers class, that is. And he has really sure hands, the best drop percentage out of any of the receivers, including Ladd McConkey, Brenden Rice, all those guys. 3.9 drop percentage, the best out of anybody. And a really solid contested catch percentage with 55.6. So there's something here. And I already talked about the run block grade. Jalen Gill measures in at 5'11 and 189 pounds and ran a 4.5 140. And so there, like I said, there's something there. He's a smaller guy, a little more compact, 4.5 40. So I think as a returner, there is something there. And in terms of offensive play, you're definitely talking about a slot guy. And that's probably where you would want him anyway, unless he's out in the boundary off the line of scrimmage and you can get him those smoke routes where he just catches the ball and takes off, or, those 5-yard stops, turn to the quarterback. That's what he does offer. And I don't know if anybody else in this draft class outside of Ladd really offers what Jalen Gill offers. I think he brings something to the table that's unique versus guys like Brenden Rice, Cornelius Johnson, Jalen Johnson, Leon Johnson III, and it's a lot of Johnsons. And I think that unique ability, that unique skill set that other receivers don't have in the room is really going to pan out for him. I really think that's gonna make the Chargers feel a little more inclined to keep him around in terms of practice squad or around for that special teams role. So we'll see what Jalen Gill does with those special teams reps. I'm expecting it here pretty soon in terms of going into the preseason with this kick return role. And I'm excited to see what he does with it. So that leaves us with Leon Johnson III out of Oklahoma State. And simply put, Leon Johnson III is an athletic freak. And I'm going to show a catch right here against Texas A&M. And you can immediately see what I'm talking about. This dude is, he makes those catches. 60% contested catch percentage. And, the hands on paper, 10.8% drop rate, that's a little concerning, but the 14.5 average depth of target, I think there's something there with Leon Johnson, especially given his size. He's 6'4", 210 and runs a 4.5 40. And probably the most impressive bit is a 10-10 broad jump. That's ridiculous. His wingspan is an 80 3/4. This dude is humongous, and it definitely shows when he's fighting for the football and boxing out DBs or just making these alien grabs that Leon Johnson can ball. And we were talking earlier about Cornelius Johnson being this guy who plays the deep part of the field really well, and I wish he saw more of those opportunities, and I wish he had more opportunities to get those contested catches because he had such a good percentage of them. And, he played them so well, and the high effort in the run game too. Leon Johnson showed some good things in terms of run blocking. And Leon Johnson's kind of the same deal for me. I really liked what I saw from him in the deep part of the field. And it's, maybe the Chargers see a little bit there in terms of what Justin Herbert likes in his wide receivers. I wouldn't be shocked, because Leon Johnson, that's a guy you want to take a flyer on, especially if Justin Herbert's your quarterback. That just makes sense. He's going to be a great boundary option for them in the preseason. and an extra body for them in camp, to get these guys some reps with the big bodied receivers and maybe get some magic happening in terms of some spectacular grabs down the sideline, or working on accuracy with a large catch radius. And Leon Johnson's kind of like that. When you talk about Quentin Johnston being a bigger wide receiver, but not having that physical dominance, that presence when the ball is in the air. Leon Johnson is that, right? What he's not is a yards after the catch guy. What he's not is a move him around the line of scrimmage and get him some open. No, it's, put him on the boundary and let him make a great play. And I think if you afford him those opportunities in training camp and in the preseason, he will shock some people. He will surprise some people, because he's going to make a ridiculous grab at some point. I just know he is, because his college tape is full of them. So Leon Johnson, definitely somebody I'm excited to see, because you pair his size with his athletic ability and with his high average depth of target and contested catch ability. 100%, I'm going to be excited to watch a player like that anytime that they stand out to me on paper in the preseason. You're talking. Well, I'm not going to compare him to anybody at all, but there was a player, Tyrell Williams, not way back, but a few years ago, where it was kind of that same deal. You go into the preseason, you're like, dude, this guy is huge. He definitely has NFL size on him. He definitely is a big dude. Difference was Tyrell was not the aggressive catcher that the aggressive pass catcher that Leon Johnson was. So definitely not comping him at all. But anytime that size stands out to you on paper, you're definitely going to pay a little bit more attention. So excited to see Leon Johnson heading into the training camp and preseasons. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the two tight ends here, that being Luke Benson out of Georgia Tech and Zach Hines out of South Dakota State. And fun fact about Zach Hines in particular, he actually long snapped a little bit in college. So might be something there with, I'm sure it didn't hurt in terms of looking for UDFAs to sign, that Hines had a little bit of long snapping work there. And, both these guys weren't really big, like receiving threats at all. Zach Hines posted a 63.5 and Luke Benson posted a 48.5 receiving grade. Like, they're not receiving tight ends. And you can maybe make the case that Hines offers a little bit there in terms of receiving ability, especially with his size at 6'6". But, Hines runs a 5 flat 40 time. Like, he's not going to be running by anybody. And Luke Benson with a 4.52, so a little bit fast, half a second faster. Zach Hines definitely has like the better hands and is more, I would say, more potential in the short area of the field as a receiver. But I'm really pushing it here, because these guys are not what you're looking for in terms of receiving tight ends. That's not what they are. These guys are run blockers, and it shows on their stats. Luke Benson with a 68.4 run block grade, Zach Hines with a 72.5, and these guys, Zach Hines 6'6", 260. He's a mauler. He's a mauler. And Luke Benson at 6'3", 240, runs a 4.5, is a little bit more of a utility guy. But make no mistake, these guys are being brought in for, maybe they see a little bit of potential in the receiving game with these guys, but they're going to be maulers. And that's just kind of like a statement there in terms of, yeah, we want some tight end depth. We want some competition at the back of the tight end room, but they're going to be maulers. They're not going to be potential pass catchers. They're going to be maulers. And so that's going to be interesting, because selfishly, I know we have all wanted run blocking tight ends for the longest time. And now the Chargers have 4 or 5 of them. So I'm excited to see all these guys get in work in terms of playing on the end of the line of scrimmage, or maybe even playing some of that fullback role, and just seeing the utility them moving around and what the Chargers do there, what Greg Roman does there with these guys as maybe lead blockers. I would love to see a 6'6", 260 Zach Hines lead blocking for for Gus Edwards. I think that's a lot of fun. So we'll see in the coming weeks. Both those guys are humongous football players and show potential in different areas. And I think these two signings are more indicative of how exciting the Chargers are going to be on the ground this year, or try to be on the ground this year. And especially when you talk about that stable of running backs as well. So I'm watching both these guys with more of an overarching view on the team as a whole and their philosophy heading into training camp in the preseason, and when pads come on, overall what the team looks like, especially in the tight end room, on the ends of that offensive line, and how they work those guys there. So that's what I'm looking for when I see those guys. I think that's what we should be looking for. I think that's the exciting part about this offseason, is that run game, is about those maulers. So that's what to be excited for those two. So that's kind of what to look for. That's a general overview, very, very brief description of these guys and what they bring to the table, what to be excited about. I'm sorry about the horrible mustache thing going on right now. This is a silly thing we do at work when we go out to train or out in the field. And man, I really debated shaving it for this because I didn't want the world to see it. So I left it, that way it has its time, has its room, has its time to grow out before I go out there. But man, I apologize to all of you, because that is terrible. I was trying not to look at myself that entire time because I just did not want to look. But I hope you guys were able to ignore it and pay attention to the much better thing, which is Chargers football, than looking at me. Nobody comes here to look at me, right? We're all waiting for the graphics and for the good analysis on these players. And I'm super excited to be covering these guys over this offseason, because I think you're getting a really good picture. I think we're getting a really good real-time picture of what this team is going to look like heading into training camp, into the preseason. And I think with each player that you talk about in terms of acquisitions over the draft, over UDFA, over free agency, I think we're getting a really good picture on what they're looking for, and what kind of team they're building, and a lot better picture than we've had in the past with the Chargers, because it's like we're all problem solving together. I love going on Twitter and seeing everybody like put pieces together on like, oh, this is what we're running this year, because they got this guy, this guy, this guy. Which I think is really funny, but it also is true in a sense, because they're doing a really good job of finding that archetype that they want in a position and really building and building and building. And even the depth on the back end of the rosters, on the back end of those depth charts, you see the picture, you see the projects they're working on, and see the big picture and what they're looking for in these guys. And if those guys were to come in a pinch, what the Chargers would be looking for, or what the scheme would ask of them, which I'm a big fan of, because it allows you to take a look at these players and understand what the team wants to do. And so, when you're watching, and I always enjoy football more when I do this, when I'm watching, I know, when number 35 comes into the game at receiver, that's terrible, by the way, I know that this is what he's going to be doing. And for me, that just adds to my experience when watching Chargers football. So really excited to see what this new coaching staff, that's another bit of it, is that it's a new coaching staff. So it's exciting. It's exciting to see the philosophy shift, exciting to see what kind of new players he's bringing in, and just seeing if we agree with it, or seeing like where it goes from there. And I think it's going to be a much more physical football team, and that's a lot of fun, right? We all want to see the Chargers be that hard-hitting football team, that really big line that just runs it down the middle of the defense. And I'm excited for that as everybody else, and especially when you got a quarterback like Justin Herbert that can sling it back there when the defense moves up. So I think it's been a really fun offseason so far, and I think it's just going to get better, especially as you get into the preseason and see how each of these guys applies their skill sets into the games. I'm more excited for this preseason than I have been in a few years. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I know I sure as heck have. Um, and I'm really excited to continue diving into acquisitions this offseason. And as we get closer to the preseason, I really can't wait for the preseason to be able to review that and see how these guys have progressed through training camp and see what they bring into the regular season, because that's when I have the most fun. And man, it's already been quite the off season already. I'm sorry that these haven't come more consistent than they should have been. I'm working on getting this one out by Friday, which is tomorrow morning. And so if that doesn't happen, I apologize, but latest it'll be a Saturday. Yeah, it's been a hectic time. Started, work is really ramped up, and started some college classes, so I have my plate full. But I think it's important to take the time you need to invest in your hobbies, because that's investing in yourself and having fun, man. And I enjoy interacting with all of you in the comment section or over on Twitter when you guys interact with me over there. And I enjoy the teaching moments on here and being able to share what I know. So hopefully we'll get this more weekly in terms of releasing it on Fridays. I'm expecting it to slow down in July quite a lot. So hopefully that stays true, and I can really hone in on this and college courses and such like that, and then we can get a more streamlined schedule going, and that can only make the quality of these better, and that's the goal. Oh, speaking of quality, I completely forgot to mention. So the camera's a little better. Maybe it'll focus on this. No, that's embarrassing. It didn't refocus at all. Camera's a lot better. And the microphone is hopefully a lot better if I did it right, if I set it up right. Took the time this week to fix those things. I know that was a topic of conversation in the last one, that the quality of the equipment didn't quite match the quality of the videos themselves, the information I was providing. And so I definitely wanted to improve on that. That was already a goal of mine before. It took a little longer than I wanted it to, just because of time constraints, but we got it worked out. So let me know how you guys like the new equipment. Hopefully. Oh, I didn't even notice you guys can see the signed Keenan Allen poster up there. So that was pretty cool. I still don't know where that came from, by the way. I just got that one random day. I think it was around Christmas time, and I still have no idea who sent that to me. So maybe one day I'll find out. But I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Blueprints. And I'm your host, Jason, and I really appreciate y'all listening. Here's to next time.